Hi, my name is Ken Gidge, and this is The Art of Politics. Of course, I am the Democrat, and of course, we have a Republican who's my partner in crime, Mr. O'Brien, Representative O'Brien, former House.
A lot of things.
Okay, a lot of things. You brought a guest tonight.
I did. I brought my deputy speaker with me, Pam Tucker, who's, you're in your third term, Pam?
Yes, this is my third term.
Yeah, and I appreciate you joining us, and,
well, thank you.
You know, I have a lot of questions I want to ask you, but if I can just,
well, go ahead. No, please.
I'd love to hear from you, because this is the art of politics, how you got involved in politics.
I've been involved in politics since I was 14 years of age. My mom worked for a state senator back in Michigan, and it was just part of my blood. So when I moved to upstate New York, California, I always got involved. When I moved back here to New Hampshire, which is where I wanted to live, I decided to get involved in trying to find a candidate for my town. As we know, with the 400, sometimes it's hard to find candidates. And there was no one who really wanted to run, so why not me? And I ran a really good campaign and got elected in a year that was democratically dominated.
So I think we met about 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, and one thing really impressed me when we were first talking, and that's that you met Ronald Reagan. How did that happen?
I did meet Ronald Reagan. When I lived in California, I was part of the Ventura County Young Republicans of California, and I was the executive vice president out there. And when the president managed to get us a meeting, about 10 of us, with Ronald Reagan in his office in Bel Air. And so we went up there. We all had like 20 cameras all ready to take all these pictures. But they took the pictures. Everything was all structured, but we all got our picture taken with him, shook his hand. He told us a couple jokes. This was right before his Alzheimer's was setting in, and it was just an unbelievable experience to see someone like that who is larger than life in person.
I don't know, and by the way, this is not necessarily a Republican show, it is also a Democratic show. Ronald Reagan, what in the world goes through you guys' minds about Ronald Reagan? What was so good about him?
I would ask you the same question about Bill Clinton or President Obama.
Well, I can tell you what was wrong with Bill Clinton. Obama, I think, well, you know, you don't like Obama? I
am not a fan of his politics at all.
Well, the great thing about Ronald Reagan is he's the closest we've had to Calvin Coolidge. So he's great for that reason. He's great because he understood liberty and the American tradition of individualism. He's probably the greatest president. I mean, not probably, he is the greatest president of the second half of the 20th century. And for the 20th century as a whole, he's rivaled only by Calvin Coolidge.
How do you come to that point of thinking he is that good? What was so good about the man, other than he was an actor? And he knew how to read a script. He didn't know how to write too well. Well, I shouldn't say that. He could write.
He did know how to write very well.
He didn't write his own speeches, but he did write letters. He was good at that.
You know, it's just so amazing that in this day and age, so 2013, we're sitting here talking to a Democratic representative who clearly admires a president who can't get 5 paces away from a teleprompter and say anything that's intelligible. You know, this man was able to articulate a vision for the United States that reached back into its traditions and brought them forward into what was going to bring prosperity to the United States. You know, you look at what he did on foreign policy, unlike Carter, who ended up giving us what has turned out to be a 40-year problem with Iran that's going to extend into the future when he allowed the Khomeini to take over. Unlike Obama, who's doing the same thing with Libya and Egypt and Syria.
Reagan got in was because of Iran.
This man ended communism together with the Pope and Lech Walesa. You know, this man did something that
Ended
was
communists all by himself.
together.
No one else
Together.
assisted
No,
it.
the word
Just
together.
Ronald Reagan.
The word together was in there, Ken. Together with Lech Walesa and the Pope, this man ended communism. He understood that communism, as it was being practiced in the Soviet Union, and as it would be practiced anywhere, was a house of cards. He reached in and took out a card, and it collapsed.
Yeah, well, wait a minute. Hold on. If there was one intelligent thing about Reagan, quite simply was this, is that he knew how to outspend them because he knew that they were borderline, the communists were just borderline and they could not compete with us financially. But what is it, getting away from all those policies, what is it that when I see Pam and you talk about Ronald Reagan and other people and yourself, there's like stars in your eyes? What was so magical about the man?
You know what? He was inspirational. It was a time when, if you remember back, and of course I don't really remember back when Jimmy Carter was president, but there was the word that was coined was stagflation at the time in terms of inflation and unemployment. And what he did is he brought back the hope to the American people. And I hate to use the word hope because of where it is now, but he did. We thought this country is on the really wrong track. He walked in there, and in his campaign speeches, because I do read history books, he made us feel good about ourselves and about being Americans again. He cut our taxes, and we saw unprecedented growth up until that point when he became president. It took him a couple years, no doubt. You can't flip things in 2 years. But he did that, and when he brought back the hope to people, and with the principles that our country was based on the individualism, that's why we love Ronald Reagan.
It was the contrast, too. He came off of what I would call a hair-shook presidency. Remember the Carter's speech there, that there's a malaise in the soul of this country, and a man came forward and said,
God.
it's morning in America. And America was turned around to 20 years of prosperity. He ended what had been an existential threat to the American.
Wait. Every time I hear Ronald Reagan, everybody says how prosperous he was. If I remember correctly, he left with a national debt of what? So enormous, spent more money than almost any president up to this point. Any president up to this point. It was Ronald Reagan who just spent.
Wait.
Have you figured out
and
that
the government went up, and
Ken, have
you guys
figured out
go like that.
that the words you use have to have some connection with reality, or do they just float
You're
around?
taking advantage of my root canal today. Don't do that. That's not.
I don't
that's
know where to
not fair.
begin because there's nowhere to end when we start analyzing the things you
Well,
say.
then, why don't we get over to Aort? Of course, Kelly Aort's both your friends, I take it. Kelly Aort is a friend of yours, I take it. Right?
Oh, she is, yeah. I'm just so pleased how
Yeah,
she
and
is
you?
She's
matured
doing-
as a
yes,
senator.
yes.
She's
she's
so
doing
nice,
well.
right? And
So
so,
beyond that, I think she's a great
85
senator.
to 90% of the people wanted, an extension of gun, inspection, registration. And what happened? She said no. 90% of the people, which, by the way, from what I understand, half of them were, or close to half were Republicans.
Ken,
What?
you ever heard how statistics lie? You know, the fact, if you ask people, if you ask me, if you
How
ask,
statistics?
if you ask me, if you ask Pam, do
Excuse
you want
me.
background checks? And we say, sure.
We
sure,
have
say-
background
we have
checks.
background
And she
checks.
turns around and says, why should we continue doing the same thing when it's not working?
Can you
Does
tell
that
me-
sound like
listen,
somebody who's
Ken,
in reality?
Ken.
She has the ability to say, this is a bunch of hooey. It has nothing to do with stopping the tragedies that have occurred. The background checks would not, that we have now.
45% of the guns are sold without background checks.
Now-
And are you saying that none of these guns are used?
I'm going to
what-
say one of those guns that were used in the Sandy Hook tragedy, none of these laws that they're trying to pass now would have stopped those. Those guns were purchased legally. They were owned legally. The problem is the person who used them illegally, begot them illegally.
Okay, so
So
I
the
guess
laws she's
probably.
passing-
So
the laws
most
you're
of us
trying to
know
pass
that
aren't gonna
the
fix
bill
it.
that was trying to pass was deeply flawed. For example,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
someone-
I don't wanna hear
see,
deeply flawed
It was deeply
explanation.
flawed. It would have prevented me, for example, giving a friend my shotgun to go out hunting. That would have been a felony, a federal felony. That's an example.
You
of-
couldn't lend somebody a
No,
gun.
you couldn't. You'd have to do a background check on the person first. That's the bill that she voted against.
Now,
One,
I-
it wouldn't address the problem. Two, it was nothing more than overreaching. It was gun control advocates.
So are you saying we don't need anything?
Demagoguing our national tragedy.
Okay, you said that it was a mistake. You tell me, both of you tell me. Is it mental illness? Is it guns? Is it people?
Sure,
There's a
it is.
camera.
Sure.
Tell us. And what have you
it is.
done for mental illness? Have you brought any bills? I tried this year, and you know I got beat up by? The gun people. I swear to God.
Well, I don't know what bill you brought, but we've brought bills and we've worked on bills to allow.
This
for
year?
Not this year, in other years.
Okay.
We've brought bills in to allow for more proactive treatment of the mentally ill. And we talked about this in the last show, and the ACLU comes in and says, oh, no. You have to have a criminal presumption of insanity and danger in order to take the Jared Loechners and the Holmes and the Adam Lanza and all these people who caused these tragedies and bring them under protection. You know, you look at these folks, and they were exotically ill.
Okay,
and
so
we couldn't even
okay,
get
so well, okay,
them
now wait a
treated.
minute. Okay, so you give good examples. Okay, Pam Tucker.
In terms of
What have you done? What would you do to help the
what would
mentally
I
ill?
do? I think you're right. We do need to address the mental illness issue. And how, in terms of how we're funding things, we'll have to look at the budget because we know that's in trouble right now as well. But to go and attack lawful gun owners and try and put further restriction on them
attacking lawful
by putting
gun
in
owners.
laws, you want to put in more laws on them
Nobody
because the
is.
criminals are going to buy the guns
Are
anyway.
you kidding me?
How about- okay.
Have you been watching the legislation that's been
I
coming
have been
forward?
watching.
Have you watched the
Are
legislation
you?
that Dianne Feinstein filed that would have made it a crime to have more than a magazine with more than 7 bullets in it? That would have, and the language they come up, they call them assault weapons. These aren't assault weapons. These aren't military
Okay,
weapons.
so
They're
so,
just
so the guy,
semi-automatics.
so the last guy who shot the kids and the teachers fired 154 bullets, right? In what, 3.5 minutes or something like that. So he had
I don't know, Ken.
how many? Did he 25, 30, where you can just plug it in and shoot it as if that's needed? Do you think more rounds in a magazine is necessary?
There are dangerous.
I know, are they?
There are dangerous things in our society, whether it's
No, will
the
you-
knife-
okay,
whether
will
it's a
you
knife
take 'em out?
used-
Will you take
whether
'em
it's
out?
a knife used by people, for example, that fellow in China who stabbed a bunch of kids, whether it's the bombs
Pressure
being,
cookers.
whether it's bombs being used in Boston.
Outlaws those.
What we need to do is to find those who are going to do harm that can be predicted to be doing harm and treat them. Or if they're Islamist fundamentalists, such as the
How
characters
can
in
you
Boston.
find them if you guys want to go to gun shows and check nobody out?
Don't show up. No, not one of those
Excuse
people.
me?
Not one of those.
How would you know?
Not one of those people bought a gun at a gun show.
And
This
Ken-
is just nothing more than
So,
an effort.
okay.
Ken,
Okay.
if you
of those who-
outlaw them, Ken, what's going to happen? The only people
We
who are
didn't
going to
say
have those
outlaw. Nobody said
your
outlaw.
huge magazines that you guys
didn't.
want to restrict. The only people who are going to have them are the criminals because there's so many out there already in the United States. They're the only people who have them. So what you're doing is just restricting the law-abiding citizens.
Now it's got down to how many. Is there any point with your Republicans where you turn around and say, hey, maybe we should shorten the magazines just a little?
Maybe
instead
should I
of
have 2?
150, how about 30?
What if I have
Absurd,
5 guys
illogically,
coming at me?
Is what you're doing. It's like saying there's a bad car accident, so let's stop having motorcycles. You know, it's a non
And
sequitur.
how logical you use that. Once you guys reach a certain point and you're finally getting a little pressure, now it's little old ladies going across the street and
No, it's me.
I haven't seen any little old
I'm
ladies.
trying to get out of this.
Semi-automatics, except
it's-
maybe my wife.
The
but,
thing is, you know, New York put in what they only want 7 in a cartridge or in a thing. What about me? What if I needed 10? Because it is the great equalizer is having some type of firearm.
Oh, come on, you guys. So what you're saying is
What
there
I'm
should
saying
be
is
no.
that
You
gun
want,
deaths are down. The last 20 years, the gun deaths are down by a factor of 2 or 3.
gun deaths are down.
Gun deaths
60%.
are down.
Gun deaths are
Are
down.
down in this country.
I'd like to find that statistic.
Actually, if you look at CNN today online, you'll find it. If you look in the Wall Street Journal,
Guns deaths.
gun
they're down.
deaths are
Oh,
down.
okay. So they're killing more people, right?
Actually, if the gun deaths are down, probably they're killing less.
What? No.
That's
no.
what I take out of it.
No, less people are killing each other, but it's taking one who's killing 20 at a time. Are we back to mental illness?
Actually, the number of mass shootings are down as well. There's been mass shootings since the 1920s.
Yeah, we know, I know.
This goes
I
on
know.
and on. What we need to do is to identify those who are mentally ill and try to find the legal structure as well as the funds to care for them.
Well, I think,
And we've talked about this. You know, when I had
We
my
have
office up
talked
in
about it,
when
yeah.
I had my office up in Concord, it was clear that there were people who were walking the streets because they weren't being cared for, and that's sad. And that's a tragedy.
and wait a minute. Wasn't it Ronald Reagan who let them all out? Yes, it was. If I remember correctly, it was Ronald Reagan who let all the mentally ill people out on the streets.
Actually, it was lawsuits by the ACLU as a
No,
campaign.
it was
It
Ronald
absolutely
Reagan who
was.
let them all out because he didn't want to spend the
No,
money
it was
on
a-
mental health. And so here's your Ronald Reagan.
Actually, it wasn't that. I've been around. Unlike Representative Tucker here, who just arrived on the scene 4 or 5 years ago out of her childhood. I've been here for a long time, and I can remember in the 1960s watching the left wing of the Democratic Party unfold a campaign to get mentally ill people out of institutions. And I understood it. Some of those institutions were really bad, but you might remember the film Titicut Follies, which was the first effort, you know, showing how bad the institutions were. Then they followed up with
Yes, I know. We
then
got
they
a lot of
followed up with
Massachusetts,
lawsuits and
and
so
yes,
forth.
yes, we know that.
And so-
But it was Ronald Reagan who wouldn't fund the mentally ill people, and they just opened the doors all
That-
within
that's-
6 months.
That's just,
Streets were
that's
filled.
just such an invented history, Ken. We used to have a federal government that understood its place and didn't provide any funding in any event.
All you
for-
guys,
for,
Pam, all you guys do is talk about it, and you do nothing about it. And when the Democrats make an effort to say, why don't we just give those people who are at gun shows just a check? It's real simple, as the gentleman here said 3 or 4 times. It only takes about 30 or 40 seconds or less, maybe 2 minutes, at gun shows. What's wrong with that?
It takes a little bit longer than that. I don't know where it's 30 or 40 seconds.
I never said that, but
I
No,
think you
you
did.
actually you said about 10 minutes.
I went in
No,
and bought one, and it took almost an hour for the background check to happen for me. So it does take a little bit longer than that.
Took half a day.
And you know, and if all these guns that are used in these things were being bought at these gun shows, which are not, then maybe we would have to look at that. But it's not happening. You're just putting restrictions on lawful gun owners, and you know that.
This
Oh,
is,
for
it's,
God's
it's
sakes.
opportunistic.
45% of the guns are bought at gun shows, and people are not background checks. And this is the reason why that people out there constantly say about the Republicans, they love you, you guys are really great, you supposedly have a wonderful history, but now we should do something, and the simple thing is background checks. Kelly Ayotte is now in big trouble up here in New Hampshire. And if I
No,
was
this isn't-
anyone,
Ken.
I would think of
This-
running for the Senate.
No, this is not the
it's-
biggest issue on people's minds. The biggest issue is the jobs and the economy. You know that.
if
No,
you
no, I'm
ask-
talking about up here.
No, if you ask people what are important issues, you know where gun control ranks right now? 4%. 4% of the people say that's the issue
Okay,
that
so
motivates
what, okay,
me.
wait a
You know,
minute.
this
Okay,
is-
what's
this-
number
so-
one? You got the 4%.
Oh, people always, it's always number one is jobs in the economy. You say, what's your big issue? Jobs in the economy. You know what the biggest issue is? The politicians like me. You know, that was a problem Mitt Romney had, is they couldn't relate to people. That's the problem that Anne McLean Custer has. That we all know she's different than we are. She's a person who doesn't pay her taxes until she's called out, even though we all
Yes,
pay
she
our
is
taxes.
absolutely different
And-
than you guys. She's a
and-
Democrat, and she beat
No,
a
she's-
Republican
she's-
who is very well situated and kicked the tar out of him because he constantly went down the same road all the time, like you guys are attempting to do right now. You're smart at it. You're getting better, and now I have a bad tooth, and you bring this intelligent person. By the way,
Kick the tar.
I know.
It's just these terms you use.
I know, but it's my tooth. You know, I just
Okay,
had
well,
a.
we're
It's
gonna
all
excuse
about
it.
the tooth.
All right, okay,
Okay.
let's hold on.
Mr. and Mrs. America are national out there. Give Ken some slack here. It's a tooth.
Oh, you have me at an awful disadvantage. It usually doesn't go like this. At least he's. But
No.
to change the subject to a degree.
You're always
You-
outspoken.
You should. Ken.
Yeah, all right. All right, I'm in Commerce Committee, which is Banking, Insurance, and Consumer Affairs, and sitting across from me is Pam Tucker.
Yes,
This is your first year at it?
in commerce, yes.
Yes. What do you think?
I think it's a very busy committee. What did we have, like 70 or 80 bills in there? It was kind of crazy. And they're big bills. Some
Big
of them
bills.
are really
Talk about
important
some of the bills, because obviously the gentleman over here actually left me in Commerce when you were, the speaker, which I was very happy to stay there. Anybody who gets in Commerce has got to stay there a while before you get it.
You do need the historical perspective there, and we see it from you, and we see it from John Hunt. You need that there of these bills that came in before and before and before that keep coming back. We've got a couple big ones. So the one that you're working on, SB 41?
Yes, that is
Senate Bill 41, which is a
Yes.
rewrite of the corporate laws.
to change all the corporate laws. And you talk about the dirty politics of this. We bring in, I go to the Secretary of State and I said, look, I know there's going to be a change. What would you like? What can you? So he comes into our committee, and I'd gone over it with him, and comes in with some very simple things. The first is, believe it or not, the Secretary of State, if they find a mistake within the any corporate paperwork, they can't change it. Not only can they not change it, they can't even send a note out to say, hey, guess what? You have done something wrong, even illegal. So, and that's factual. That's the truth.
One of the aspects of my law practice has been setting up corporations for European companies that are referred to me by another client, investment bank. And a lot of them will be Delaware corporations.
Oh, yes, of course.
And ideal, I've never been down in the Delaware Secretary of State's office. I've probably set up 40 or 50 corporations through there. And even when I first started doing it, if I made a mistake, and it would happen, I would set up a wrong number of directors, something like that, they'd immediately call me. And I said, we've looked it over. Do we have your permission to change this or that?
And
That'd be nice.
And it was nice.
And do you know how this came about? Up to the Secretary of State's office comes the Secretary of State of Delaware and says, look, you have two corporations from New Hampshire. One is a nonprofit, one is not, and they're trying to combine. And that's where the Secretary of State says, legally, I can't do anything.
Yeah, was the Municipal Association tried to do that?
Yeah. So to give him the right to change it's a no-brainer. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. But you fight with the lawyers, you fight with the bankers. This is a lawyer's bill, let's face it.
Without a doubt, it is. And to that point, when you look at it, we should be writing laws, obviously, for consumer protection and to help our state.
Right.
I take a look at this bill, and I know it's, 3 years in the making. It's been coming through every year. They've worked on it to try and get it better and get it better. But if I was to set up a corporation in New Hampshire, I don't see how this bill is going to make me want to do it that much better than what we currently have on our RSAs. I know it's an improvement, but it's still not user-friendly. And what we should do, if we really are serious about this and making it user-friendly, is let's go look at the states like Delaware, and I think it's Montana, which is #1 in terms of corporate structures. Let's look at what their statutes are and use those as the model and fit them to our needs.
But the problem with that is it's called the race to the bottom for the individuals who invest in the corporations, which means the best corporations throughout the United States are the corporations that give the shareholders the least rights. So we're never going to get to that point. We're never going to be Delaware. You can never be Delaware. Delaware, if you get close to Delaware, Delaware will go
like
further.
I said, you can take a little bit of Delaware's, take a little bit of Wyoming's, Montana's, the better states that have them, versus just looking at ours and still not making them user-friendly.
But would you agree, would you both agree that there should be some protection for the consumers, protection for the investors?
I think there ought to be flexibility, and shareholders can decide.
This is a lawyer.
Well,
As a lawyer.
How much in the way of
No, but
rights they should
as
have.
a shareholder, don't you send your proxies back in every year? It's
No.
Yes.
Yes, you.
We
yes,
have a
you do.
decision. We did something last term that most voters didn't talk about. We didn't talk about because it was sort of esoteric. We changed some of the trust laws in New Hampshire because we thought that there's a way to capture some of that business. And indeed, it's worked out that way.
Oh, do you know why it's worked out?
In part because we've provided greater flexibility and allowed wealthier individuals to set up their trusts here. We have friendly laws.
Yes, but
And we can do the same.
but-
We can rival Nevada and Montana
No.
and Delaware and
never.
have great prosperity.
Well, you want to talk about? Let's talk about trust because this is exactly what the Secretary of State has told me. He said, when we had a meeting, and this was at a lawyer's office, you got to remember that for people who don't know, we get really into these things. So it was myself, and I brought in Munns on 41, this Bill 41. So we get up to this table, and they said there was no room in the State House, no room in the LOB building, so we had to go to a lawyer's office on Main Street in Concord. So we get up there, and there's this big table, obviously. You've got the lawyers, you've got the business people, you've got the everybody, bankers, then you have somebody from the Secretary of State, and two of us, Muntz and myself.
Who's Muntz?
Pardon me?
Who's Muntz? Just for
Representative.
I'm sorry. I apologize. And it was my bill. I said, would you like to come on? He said, sure. So fine. So we get on there. But it's interesting because what we want to do for the last part of the bill is to have something almost identical to the trusts, because you did open the trust. But what the trust turned around and said, yes, you can do this, and the individuals who are in the trust have to follow certain things, and you have strict rights. These people would not even come close to that. They do not want the consumer, the individual who buys the stock or the bond, to have the ability to say, look, I want the names of these people because I'm a stockholder. So what the lawyers would do is they say, well, take us to court. Well, the problem is the lawyers are really good at take us to court. You want the stuff before the meeting. They'll take you right through the meeting, and you get nothing. So that's somewhat of the argument. That's putting it very...
There is a baseline, just as a lawyer, I'll tell you, there's a baseline that is addressed through SEC regulations, and I think what you're talking about is what kind of information you can have if there's going to be a proxy fight. If we try to exceed...
Doesn't have to be a proxy. Doesn't have to be a proxy fight, remember.
For whatever reason. You're right. If it's just going to be trying to get a resolution passed and you want to do some electioneering in front of the shareholders. If we try to exceed that, we can put a law in place and say, we feel real good about it. We've done more than the SEC requires.
Now, where are you going with this? Where are you going with this?
What I'm going to tell you is, we won't have any public companies incorporated in New Hampshire. Or I'll be incorporated
in Delaware. And the reason why is...
we can...
No, the reason is why?
The reason is because they will go to those jurisdictions that have the most favorable laws.
Who give the least rights to the stockholders.
And so rather than us think that we can be sanctimoniously protective of shareholders, and it'll all be theory because there'll be no companies incorporated.
Well,
we can address.
We have a problem because didn't we hold a bill, FRM?
Yes.
Retain it?
Yes, Senate
Why?
Bill 180.
Because of all these people losing so much money?
They did, and then, but that bill has a lot of issues. I think that's a little bit different because, yeah, that bill has issues of, well, if the state had made a mistake, which is kind of what the bill says, the state made a mistake, so now we should at some point compensate these people because the state made a mistake.
By the way, AL was in on that. When I asked her if she at that time she had just left to run for the Senate, and she was there, and I was Commerce, Senate, House. Let me finish. So I asked Ayotte if she knew about it off RM, and obviously she had to, but she said no. She said, but the buck stops at my desk, but first the buck has to come to my desk. And I said to her, that's not really what it means. And
listen, the viewers ought to know what this bill is, and I think I understand what it is. It's basically saying that we're going to pay off investors in a company called FRM. It's an acronym that stands for something mortgage or whatever, and they invested in it. It turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. They were supposedly going to get real great returns on their investment, and many of them didn't get anything because the money was being taken from them. Now,
no, that's not how it happened.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, well, I know that.
And a Ponzi scheme is a very classic scheme where you're using money coming in from subsequent investors
I know how that works. But you got Peter Hildreth, whose two brothers were in the corporation, who made money off it, and just before it fell, they get out of it.
So what you want to say?
Who's Peter Hildreth?
The
banking commissioner.
What you want to say to each one of the taxpayers out there is, Peter Hildreth or Kelly Ayotte or John Lynch didn't do what he or she was supposed to do, so you're going to have to pay.
That's
And
pretty
that's
much what the
exactly
bill
what
is
is being
coming
said.
up as.
That's
is
exactly.
such
Where do you
garbage.
think the money comes from?
You
The state?
had
The money doesn't.
banking, you
going
had
to
the
come from
Attorney General's
fees.
office
It's-
lying to
it's
people,
going to- it is-
giving them not
It's
the right
state money.
information.
If we do
it's
this,
gonna-
it's state money. And so therefore, it's taxpayer money to pay these people
Yeah,
back.
we don't
That's
have,
exactly
we
what
don't
it's going
have
to be.
Bernanke and over in the
Oh,
federal
you know,
Fed here. Who can we just say turn on
Okay,
the
so
If
press?
this happens
let
the
me
way
see-
it's written
so
right
let
now.
me see. So the people in government, and because we are the government, we should not be responsible.
No,
and we should not, and we should lie. It's okay for the banking people to say,
It's not
you,
we.
you
It's not,
call
it's
us
not
up.
Tim Gidge, it's not
Absolutely
Pam
not.
Tucker, it's not Bill O'Brien. It's all the
It's
taxpayers
the
out there.
elected officials who have to make
But
the bills of the
it's not us
statutes.
paying, it's going to be taxpayers paying. And you're saying
We
to people
are
that
taxpayers.
you're saying to every one of those taxpayers out there, that law enforcement in New Hampshire didn't do what it's supposed to do, so you pay.
We're not
And-
talking
and-
about law enforcement. We're
That's-
talking
that's-
about
yes.
the
Yes, it
banking
is.
department.
That's law enforcement. They
Well,
enforce
we're-
the laws, the banking
okay,
laws.
we're-
And
we're
you want to know
talking-
what? This logically has no end, because you can have somebody whose house was burglared and can sue the state, saying, you want to know what?
Stick to
No,
one
this-
thing. Stick to one
no,
thing.
no,
Now, we
it is
go
a
from the
consistent-
state being bad to a burglar.
No, we aren't.
come on.
Follow me on it.
at
This
what
isn't
point
too
isn't this-
complicated.
I'm
Right.
coming out of it.
This
At
isn't
what
too
point isn't the
complicated,
state
Ken.
responsible if the state makes a mistake and didn't follow through? At what point isn't the state responsible if we follow through on your logic?
You forgot to
do-
catch the burglar, and so he burglared my house, so pay me.
So the
Pay
police,
me.
the police didn't come.
Excuse me.
Yeah, the
Hi,
police didn't come on
I'm
time.
a potential investor calling the state of New Hampshire. What do you think about this corporation? Oh, they're good. They're really good. Terrifically good. I should invest in them. Yes. Click. That's what happens.
I read the report.
These
and
people
that
turn
isn't
around,
I read the
and what
report.
happens?
I read the report.
$30
and that's
million
not what happened.
lost.
I read the report.
Are they going to get any money, Pam?
I don't know, the
Ken,
bill
Are they
has
going to
been
get any
retained.
money? Are they getting any money?
You're asking me to, in order to answer that question, assume a fiction, which is just the account that you just gave that somebody called and said and got a positive recommendation. What they
You
didn't
read
do
the
is they-
report. I helped write the
And
report.
what didn't happen is that the state didn't look at the warning signs and act. That's going to happen all the time. Sometimes, most times, you don't look at warning signs and nothing happens.
It was
And-
thievery,
and-
outright thievery.
Well,
That's all it was, and it was
it
done by
was.
state officials.
It
for
may have
God's sake.
been,
So what
but
are
you
gonna do?
know what we can learn from this, and we see it with other bills that have come through Commerce. We don't continue to make bills that might give the consumers that feel-good feeling that, oh, the state says they're okay, oh, they're a legit business, so I can do business with them, and my money's safe. We can't continue to put through bills like that forward.
So, Ms. Tucker, Mr. O'Brien, representative,
you're gonna explain
you will vote then when it comes up for vote in the House of Representatives, and I say, gee, we finally got the right wording. All right, so it's going to protect the investors. You both will vote for
We'll
it.
have to see the final wording and see where we're at this point.
Right.
Let me answer this, okay, without being interrupted.
It's a lawyer's bill.
I'm
Not being interrupted.
I'm not going to vote in favor of a bill that says to investors, heads you win, tails the taxpayers lose. Because that's what you're saying. Do you think those investors are going to share their profits with the taxpayers?
No,
Now, what
You're
they're asking
you're
is
still
for the
talking
tax.
about FRM. I'm
Yes.
talking about the bill. How we want to stop people from stealing, and we want the right of people investing in this state, and you want them to feel that they can do it, and they do have some rights. This is all the end of the bill for the corporate laws. That's the only thing
Am
it's
I going
saying.
to put the taxpayers on the line when people's investments don't work out? No.
No. We're talking about two different things.
Well, if we're talking about the corporate bill, if we're making a bill that's going to be more onerous than other states because we're competing with other states to bring corporations here, why would I vote for that?
Well, would you?
First of all, it's just a silly thing to do, Ken.
To do what?
To put a corporate law in place, an incorporation law in place, that is going to be more onerous than states we're competing against.
Okay, well,
because nothing, we won't get any
Why will they
business.
come? What will
bother?
make
This
a
is
company come to
why
our state?
and this is the problem, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm having is What we want is those who invest in the corporation to have the ability to have the corporation be responsible instead of turning to these people and saying, right or wrong, go get yourself a lawyer, let's go to court. Do we want that? Or do we want somebody to say, well, wait a minute, let's take a good look at this?
What we are saying is we don't even agree with you that that's the alternative. What we're saying is that we ought to have a law that's reasonably protective of shareholders and recognizes the reality that we compete against other states for incorporation business. So let's compete against them. Let's not do something silly and think that we can
And
pass a law
I
that will never be used. And we
absolutely
go home to Nashua and Mount Vernon
Agreed.
and Greenland and say, what great people we are.
No,
and
no.
Meanwhile,
Well,
no
I think you're
jobs.
comparing apples and oranges here
Yeah,
when you're
I think
talking
so.
corporations and FRM.
I think we are also. But, so we better move on. By the way, my clock went out, so someone better tell us when we've got about 10 minutes left because.
You'll keep talking.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we got through that. We didn't scour each other up. I mean, Ronald Reagan, the great, God. And by the way, I'm just finishing a book on George Washington. Oh my God, a biography. What a moment in history, obviously. You're reading
He's a
Bunker Hill?
Reagan-like figure, he really is, George
Oh.
Washington.
I'll tell you, every
True
single
leader.
person
A true leader.
every single person who wrote about him said exactly that he had this aura about him.
We talked about that in session when we were waiting for some bills to be voted on this past week. And, I think some of the remarks we made were just absolutely true, which is, this is, George Washington is recognized as not, probably the most intelligent of the founding fathers. He's obviously a remarkable man and very intelligent, but, you try to compare him to a Benjamin Franklin or a Thomas Jefferson. He didn't have the intellectual wattage that they did. But when it came to social intelligence, it came to understanding of people and understanding of the situation, he was remarkable. He was sort of like, Franklin Roosevelt, who was, in many ways, kind of dim, but in point of fact, he had great social intelligence. He understood people.
One thing you must understand, let's face fact, any leader or anyone, yourself is potentially running for Congress, and also the former, representative of the House, the leader of us. We all have done our share. But one thing we do know is that you've got to find the right people, too. Well, it doesn't make any difference how smart you are or not smart. It's far better to be maybe not the smartest one in the room.
And you do, and I mean, that's one of the reasons I appointed Pam as deputy speaker, because I knew in many ways where I was weak, she complimented what we're doing.
We had different skill sets.
Yes.
And it worked well.
One of the things I did want to get to is...
And by the way, I just wanted to, let's make this really clear. Pam, that's a tough job. That's not an easy job she had.
Well, it isn't.
No.
I mean,
No, that's a...
It's probably one of the tougher jobs in the House. I'm not saying that because I was in it, but you look at who is before me and who's after
Well,
me.
I know that.
It's all work. There's no glamour or anything in the job because it's all behind the scenes stuff. But it's doing what's right and it's working with the whole House.
Well, it's doing what you think is right.
Well,
In
without a
attempting
doubt.
to work with the whole House.
Oh, no, but you do. You work with both sides of the aisle. You have to. You're in the Speaker's office. I mean, certainly we are partisan. You're partisan. I'm partisan. But you do work with the whole House. You have to. And I've approached our deputy speaker.
Well, I do want to congratulate you because it was hot, and I think you're really, the job that you had done, and I think we're right now in Commerce, I think you're getting an idea what we go through.
Yes.
This is tough stuff. And also, you did put me in the committee to study the Liquor Commission, and obviously the individual who lost the contract, Brian Law of Law Family, is right here in Nashua, and I certainly wish that didn't happen. Do you have any updates? Does anybody know anything?
Well, I just want to talk about that appointment because, again, the relationship that Pam and I had is I would turn to, and did in that instance, turn to Pam and say, who should we put on that committee? And it was an important part of what Pam did for me was look over and try to make sure on a special committee like that we had the right mix of people in terms of interest and skills.
I think you did.
Yeah, it worked out well. And
I
a lot
think
of it has to do with what Pam was doing.
And for people who really want to know, our last committee meeting was 2 or 3 days after the election. Right. And that day, I swear, I really mean this, I don't mind saying this, I thought I had lung cancer. that very
no.
day as I'm leaving, the phone rings, you're fine. Driving down the street, someone hits me from behind.
Really?
I swear to God. So anyway, that's my liquor commission.
Well, there are
sort of-
some bills that came out of that commission too.
Yes,
Yep.
there are bills coming out.
You know, and one of the things that Pam is doing now is serving as co-chair of the House Republican Alliance. And I'm sure that Ken needs to know, but I'm sure the viewers would love to know what that association is, what it does, and what you do. in
What
that
the
role.
House Republican Alliance, it's been around for 15 years, Ken, so you must have seen it for a few of those.
No, if it's Republican, you know, you guys just, okay, no, explain
It's,
to
no,
us.
it's policy-based, and that's what's interesting about it. Obviously, it's political because we're Republicans, but it's all based on policy and constitution and platforms. So when you look at a bill and you get the ratings, you're rated, every member of the House is rated. It's the only true rating system up there at the House of how people vote. It's based upon the constitutions. Are we following the U.S. Constitution and the New Hampshire Constitution, be it Republican or Democrat? And then the third factor is the Republican platform of where we stand on that. And you're rated from 100% down to 0% in terms of how well you follow those guidelines. But it's all on policy. There's no personalities involved in it, so it's pretty black and white.
Yeah, and it's an interesting process.
But why is it all Republicans?
Because it isn't the House Democratic Alliance?
No,
It's House
why is, it,
Republican.
why is it always these organizations and groups that are so good?
Well, let me answer that, and then Pam can probably give a better answer.
Well,
But
before you do, when it comes, whoever's doing the camera in there, we do appreciate it, but knock on the door when we've got 10 minutes, because my clock right here went out, so. I'm sorry.
Because when we are elected as representatives, there's a couple of things that we have to keep in mind that are overarching, very important. One is that we have to act in accordance with the Constitution, and we want to talk to people. What's your understanding about this bill as it relates to the federal Constitution, the state Constitution? So that's part of what we do. The other part of it is that we go to voters and say, I'm a Republican, just as you go to the voters and say, I'm a Democrat. And they say, well, what does that mean? And you say, well, we have a party platform, you know, and it means that.
Is
Now-
your party
now,
platform
that doesn't-
changing?
It does.
It changes a
growing?
little bit
Is
here
it
and
getting
there.
better?
But it's basically the low taxes, but
Inclusive?
And so what we
it
want to be
changes.
able to say to voters is that I have been up there, and to the extent you had expectations that were founded on that document, here's how I've either met those expectations or if I've departed from them, because none of us are 100%. If I've departed from, here's why I did. You know, if for example, the party platform says we don't support gambling, if I'm someone who does, I want to talk to you about why I did that. And so what it does is it opens up the process. It's just like roll call votes where we actually put our name on our vote and go to the voters with it. This puts our name on our record. We can go to the voters.
Well,
with
talk
that
about
record.
gaming. Are you guys for gaming? Are you for gaming?
personally, people should be able to do what they want with their money, but the voters, who I am ultimately responsible for, they have, are responsible too, they have told me they don't want gambling in my town, and so I'm against it.
I'm getting awfully uncomfortable with the bill that's moving forward. It creates a monopoly. It responds to overspending, a proposal by the governor to overspend. It basically is being used to grow government. The supposed revenue is going to grow government rather than doing what we need to have done, which is to keep government appropriate sized. It's not requiring the governor
But you
to
guys
make
keep
the
Well,
cutting and
where are
cutting
you on
and cutting,
gambling?
and you're not bringing
Where-
any money.
We
And
cut
no, I am
once. We cut once.
I'm
In-
absolutely
in the
for
decades.
gaming.
You're for,
and-
how is it going to help
Keep
Nashua?
cutting. You can't say
How is
things
it going
like
to help
that.
How is
that?
it gonna-
Well, wait
it's
a
going to
minute.
be over. It's going to be not. It's not in Nashua. It's a government-chosen monopoly that's basically going to be
No,
highly
government, you mean state.
or state.
State
Yeah,
government,
state
okay, all right,
government-controlled
all
monopoly.
right.
State government.
They monopolize it by saying that
Saying
you may have the first license.
You can have this one and you can have it in this location. So they're
Okay.
basically controlling the monopoly of who's going
Anything
to get
wrong
it
with
as
that?
well.
What's wrong with that?
With government-run
No,
monopolies?
no. This is just one place coming in. Don't you think we should
What?
get one or two places in? So you're
I
saying
tell
the
you
government does monopoly? Then they don't run in the place.
If
They're
you
just
want,
giving the
if
spot.
you want gambling in the state, do it like Nevada. Make it available to anyone. Because you know what? Up north,
like
they,
Nevada.
they
Do-
probably
do
need
it-
it up north more than
Oh, my
Salem
God,
needs it.
I know,
There's
I
no
know,
business up there.
I know Nevada very well. You don't want to do it like that.
That's, I don't want
What you-
gambling.
What you want to say, if you're gonna do it, is if you meet certain standards, then you can put it anywhere where you can put a commercial business, if you're going to do it in the first place. What this is it's setting the grounds for favoritism and corruption.
Oh, come
That's
on.
why we don't like
We are
monopolies.
the least corrupt state in the United States. We
Oh,
make
you wanna
$100 a year. How are we gonna make
You
money
wanna know
on
what?
it?
We don't have gambling, do we?
Yeah,
So
well,
you,
so
you wanna be
what?
able to say
Reasons
that
why.
5 years from now?
No, wait a minute. Don't we have card playing? You go to these places.
Charitable
We
gaming.
have bingo.
Charitable
Oh,
gaming
charitable.
halls.
Okay,
Charitable
in
gaming
bingo.
halls.
Do you know more people lose money on bingo?
And all those
than
will be
almost
gone.
anything?
If you
When
bring
you hear
gambling
these
in,
statements
those
from
will be
Ken,
gone.
You have to check on. You got to check on this. I try to sneak one
Every
through.
time, he's got to get a different way of saying it. Because every time he says, "Do you know that?" most viewers are sitting there, and certainly his co-host is sitting there going, "No, Ken,
No.
none of us
So,
do.
Kenny, you
Nor
wanna
are we
put-
ever going to know
You
that."
want to put Granny's Bingo Parlor out of business by bringing in
No,
millennium
that's the
gambling?
last
Is that
people
what you want to
I
do?
don't want any old people mad at me. Please, I'll pick you up. I'll give you a ride to the store, but I don't want anyone mad at me. But we have to get them. If you're for gaming, we have to get one in here, no matter how we get it in here. Sorry. I happen to agree with you, is that I think people should come in. I think they should bid on areas. I think there should probably be at least 4 in New Hampshire. But we have a great problem, and that's called Massachusetts, and they are going to have it. And we're going to lose.
And we're going to have a casino ghetto up here because they're putting $9 billion casino destinations, and we're going to have a casino that's done on the cheap.
At $450 million, that's not on the cheap.
Compared to
Yeah,
a
compared
billion
to-
dollar
and
And I
location.
know what
Compared
billion
to-
casinos. I was in Vegas when they came up with the first billion
Yeah,
casino.
well, that's what they're going to have down in, 3 of them, 2 of them, down in Massachusetts. We're going to have a
$1 billion
poor
isn't that
imitation.
much. It's not that much today, especially in gaming. It's
Well,
not that much
I
money.
gather, I looked at Maggie Hassan's budget, and she probably thinks $1 billion's not a lot, but for most taxpayers, $1 billion's still a lot of money.
So are you saying we should? Now you're saying we should have gaming.
I'm saying that what we should do is live within our means and not try to get all this money.
But $1 billion
extra money, so we can
is still
just-
$1 billion.
Okay.
Did I catch him?
$1 billion is still $1 billion.
It's still a lot
Has
of
nothing
money.
to do with the discussion.
No,
As a
it
basic
doesn't.
statement, you're right.
I
mean,
wanna know
who
how
can
many
afford
minutes
it?
we
You
have
know-
left.
You know, $100 million is still $100 million, but then that doesn't advance anything here.
At $100 a year for us, anything is a lot of money. And boy, I'll tell you what, after what we've gone through at Commerce and yourself and everything that you're doing, they're certainly getting them the money's worth out of us.
Well, I mean, you guys are doing a lot. As
Yeah, we
Representative
are.
Tucker was saying, 70 or 80 bills, and I know that
was
the
crazy
bill that
this
you're
year.
sponsoring is a very, very complicated bill. And,
I couldn't
reflects
explain
a
it,
lot
yeah.
of work.
It's not just that. There's other ones. We have the Dealer Bill of Rights, and
Dealer
that
Bill of
has become
Rights.
just a massive campaign
Right.
on both sides.
Right.
Which
Both
is-
sides, right.
Yeah, both
What's going to
sides
happen
are
on
it.
that? I mean, you guys are in the midst of this. Is it gonna pass,
I think
not
we've
pass?
got all of the amendments down,
Yeah.
and we're going to vote on it next week. We're going to
Yeah.
exact it.
Well, it's very, very tough. It's very,
How's it going to come out of committee?
It's coming
We're
ought to
favorable?
pass amended.
Yeah.
Ought to pass
Yeah.
amendment?
There's
Yeah,
a
I
lot
think,
of changes that had to come through from the Senate.
I'd say probably, what would you say, 3/4 of us will say yes.
Yes.
15, how many in a committee, 19?
18 or 19.
18, 19,
yeah.
15 to 3 or 4 or something like
Yeah,
that.
I
There's
think-
going
I
to be a
think
few
so.
people, and
Yeah.
we pretty much know who they are. But it's
Because there's so many amendments. There's amendment on everything.
right, and you could pick it apart, and you could say, "Oh, I'm not voting for this one piece." When you have an omnibus
Yeah,
bill like
that's the
that, it's
problem with those big
really
bills.
hard. Yeah.
It's a big bill, but the way it looks is the dealers have taken a lot of abuse from the automakers. The automakers we bailed out, they are paying us back, that's nice. But when dealers are told to build something within, every 7 years, something new that's gonna cost millions, why?
Right. It was becoming extremely burdensome on the dealers. And the first argument is, what are we doing getting involved in contracts? Was the first and foremost argument that we
Right.
talked about. And in fact, it has been upheld in U.S. courts that we can get involved if they are unfair. And so that allows us
Very
to.
unfair.
Well, and then there's those of us who say, we ought to have free markets. We ought to, other than regulate them, move away
Right.
from trying to choose winners and losers.
Exactly.
But we don't have a free market there. And you touched on that, Ken, is that, you have these large companies that are basically dictating to local businesses how they run themselves and micromanaging them and ignoring their ability to stay in business.
Well, I'm going to take it we have 5 minutes left, okay? Because no one's banging on the wall, so I would say 5 minutes left. I'm really happy that Pam is here. Pam will be back. We have 10
And you have
minutes.
10
Did you say we have
left.
10?
Yes.
Where did that
Okay,
voice-
we got 10
where did
minutes.
that
We have
voice come
voices all
from?
over the place. All right, well, we're
So-
still happy we're here, but we got 10 minutes. We got 5 more minutes to talk. Anyway, back to the dealer's bill, how complicated these things are, and how many amendments?
Oh, we had countless amendments, because if you remember, there was 12 different sections
12
of the
different
bill,
sections, and-
and we picked apart every single section of that bill.
So this is a bill that came over from the Senate.
Yes,
And so a lot of amendments has anyone been dealing with the Senate on these amendments?
the Senate is well aware of a lot of the amendments we made. If you look at it, quite a few senators signed on. I think 15 of them signed on, or something crazy.
Right,
So when they wrote the bill and passed it, it came right over, knowing full well it needed a lot of work, and that's what we do.
Do you know, that's correct, they don't even know. In fact, what they did is throw it to us, let us do
Yeah.
the work, all right? Do you realize?
Let me just
we-
stop you there,
Yes,
because
go
the
ahead.
House does the work. in
We
the
do the
legislature.
work.
Well,
I mean, there's so many of us.
correct.
And we have so many committees that
Correct.
and
We
most
do the
voters
work
don't
for
know that.
them.
We do the
The
work.
House
But
is
to
the
get back to the corporate law bill, we are arguing up there. It's the end. We're almost ready to leave, and the guy says to me, "Well, we have the 24 senators who voted yes." And I went, "Excuse
So?
me?
I would just say, so?
Did 24 of them know that the Secretary
they're
of State
doing?
could not fix something that was wrong?" Anyway, that's the type of attitude also. And I don't think people understand this in politics, that we
Well,
really take a beating.
Well,
I don't think they understand it about politics in New Hampshire, because lobbying goes on in the Senate. It's much tougher to lobby us in the House. It's just
Yes.
so many of us. You know, I would see this as speaker. You know, we have benches outside the Speaker's office, and there's
Yes.
benches outside the Senate President's office. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, you walk by the benches outside the Speaker's office, not too many lobbyists sitting there waiting for meetings. If you go over to the Senate, then there's a lot of lobbyists.
Oh, yes.
Because that's where they work their changes.
Yes.
There's just
Yeah.
fewer of them. And
Yeah.
it's, you know,
That's a
much
sad,
more
that,
efficient.
that's the sad
It's easier to
part.
do, and the senators obviously need more money to run.
Well,
We don't need
that's
any
it,
money.
true. Yeah.
It's talked about, it is money, sadly, it is. Senators would get from lobbyists from 500 to thousands in some cases.
And I want to be clear, this is not, you know, a partisan.
No,
no, no,
not
no,
one-
no,
not
no,
one party
no, no,
over another
no, no,
party.
no, no,
It's just the
it-
nature of the beast. nature
Yes,
of our-
well, if you're only paid $100 a year, or $200 a year, or $100 a year, senator or a House member, you know, you can't even take care of your car, basically. I mean, come on, it's 55 cents a mile.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
peanuts
it's
when it
just
comes
so,
to
it's very
replacing
difficult,
tires.
but we're not complaining.
No,
We're doing the work. What's very interesting is definitely in education.
Yeah.
Of that, I love the fact that it is an education, and you don't realize how much you learn until you start talking to one of your constituents about it, and you start saying stuff, and you realize, oh my gosh, I really do know a lot about that, and a lot about the process, a lot
Commerce
about the
is
bills.
one of the busiest, most difficult, because it's banking, insurance, and consumer affairs. It's
Sure.
just so,
But those are the issues that
Yeah.
affect you know, aside from the banking and the insurance, although they do affect everybody, but the business affairs, that affects basically everybody in the state
correct?
in terms of your small businesses, your large
Correct.
businesses.
Small, large.
It's
right.
a very important committee in that regard, because we can have a huge impact on businesses.
And you chose her to be your deputy speaker, and I'm glad, because I went up to her after we had really one tough day, and I walked up to her and I said, "You belong here."
Well,
Yeah,
that,
she's
that
got a
leads me
mind
to
for
my,
it.
one
And I'm not tapping everyone on the back and saying, good. That's just factual. It's just a fact. We need people in there who can think
And who care about the issues.
and
and
care about the
that leads
people.
me to what was going to be one of my last questions, which is, where does Representative Tucker go from here? You going to run again? What do you see yourself doing in developing?
We
your
have, how
career?
many? We have like 20-some bills retained in commerce. I think I want to get through those first before I
Okay.
start looking at 2014.
I think
Okay.
everybody will run at least twice from when you're in commerce. As far as I'm concerned, I think I'm pretty much have had it.
Right.
It's just, it's not just fighting I think people, the easiest part is to get elected. And then because of the way the structure of the Democrats, Republicans, I am arguing with both parties to get something, what I think is right. And that's just too much.
Well, I think it happens on both sides for us. It happens with us too. We're arguing against our own Republicans for a bill.
Correct.
Because
What committee were you on before?
I was on Environment and Agriculture.
Okay,
First
how do you
term.
compare the two?
This one's
Just
so
in terms
much
of
busier.
volume,
Yeah, just the volume is overwhelming. E&A was easy.
Right.
It was a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. We had some great tours, wineries and stuff.
Right,
but-
right.
And some great debates
Really?
and some really upset people. And it's really quite a, and matter of fact, there are lobbyists who I talk to will go in and just sit there to see, gee, who's going to say what, or what's going to happen over there.
Yeah.
Because we got 5 minutes. Did you say 5 minutes? 3 minutes?
Yep.
Well, anyway, Pam, I want to thank you very much. And by
thank
the way,
you for
do you have a
having me.
telephone number or an email address or Facebook that you would like to look in the camera and tell
Oh,
people?
sure. If you need to get a hold of me, my email is pamzt, that's Z as in zebra, T as in Tucker, at comcast.net.
Telephone number or?
That's easiest.
Email address,
That's
that's
probably
it.
the best way to get a hold
Okay,
of me, especially
great.
when I'm sitting committee and the phone goes off and then we have to pay $5.
No.
I heard about this. $5
Yes.
is steep.
$5 for
I tell you,
what?
we're going to have
I-
a huge
I could-
party at the end
It
of
went
the
like this
year.
over my head. $5. Okay, what is it?
Well, it's
How
the,
often have you
it's the
paid?
kitty for, it's supposed to be for the coffee and the tea because half of
If
us
the
drink.
phone goes off?
Yeah, if your phone goes, I'm supposed to pay $5.
$5. Yes,
Yeah.
that $5 I know of.
That $5. So that $5, we should have the phones that go off in there. People forgetting to turn off their phones. We should have a big party at the end of the year.
$5 is true. And some of the lobbyists didn't want to pay, and I grabbed them in the hallway. But anyway,
For you.
yourself, what are you up to? What's going on?
Oh, well, just planning each week to sit and talk with you. I really have to prepare myself.
Oh,
for this.
jeez.
You know, Ken, it's, I have to stay attuned to when you say, do you know that? And, you know, just knowing that I have to know, you know, that isn't true. But so that's about it.
Email address, Facebook. Sorry, I want to get out of here. Hurry up, hurry up.
It's my name spelled out. It's WilliamLO'Brien@gmail. Call me at home. You can call me at 673-6610. Or call Ken Gidge, who's constantly on the lookout for me.
That's right. My name is Ken Gidge, and these are two Republicans, and if you haven't figured it out, they're pretty smart. But I've also had a root canal today, which is true, okay? So I'm somewhat below the weather, but still, two intelligent people. Okay, you can get me at Gidge World, which is an art website. It just went off, so I guess it was on. I have an art website, and it's called Gidge World. You can also get me at kgidge@aol.com. That's KGIDGE @aol.com. And Bill?
Thank you.
Thanks. Had fun.
Good.
Pam, thanks for coming.
Thank you, sir.
We really appreciate it. Thanks.